with that, I will start my presentation. And I actually want to start with a figure from the IEA Southeast Asia Energy Outlook. I thought that would be fitting. That shows the development that the ASEAN power system is going to take over the coming decades. And as you'll see from this figure, it's quite a significant change. And as Director Goh also mentioned, there's really some ambitious targets here. But what I really want to mention here is that the ASEAN power system will go from a situation where you have VRE shares below 10% today, and up to 45% in the future in 2050 in the IEA SDS scenario. This renewable energy is comprised of hydro, but also quite large shares of solar and wind. And this really does have implications for the power systems. And that's what I want to talk about today. So what implications does it have? Well, it really means that flexibility needs to be at the heart of the system. And I think this figure really illustrates that quite a lot. Right now we are, or at least I am, quite conditioned to think that flexibility comes from generation. You forecast demand and schedule generation, but in the future I think this will very much change. And I also want to congratulate EMA for the commencement of Singapore into the LTMS, because that indeed is a real milestone for ASEAN in terms of providing flexibility from other sources, like, for example, transmissions, which you'll see here. You can also have flexibility from battery storage, pumped hydro, and then demand side management, which is what the topic is in this training. I also want to mention sector coupling because industrial heat, for example, or district cooling, which is quite important for the Southeast Asia, will potentially be able to provide flexibility. Hydrogen, electric vehicles, these types of things are not to forget. But when you look at the ASEAN targets, you have the APAEC, which has targets both on energy efficiency, the grid, and renewable energy. For example, one of the targets is 35% renewable power in power generation. But also the energy efficiency, other than energy intensity targets, also has a roadmap towards resilient and low emission buildings. And I think this resiliency is really important because it really does interact with the rest of the power system. And there's a target on the ASEAN power grid, increasing cross-border connectivity as a source of flexibility. But grids are also needed in order to ensure the ability for buildings, for example, to supply flexibility. So to me, all of these things work together. And I pointed the arrows towards the renewable energy, but really there is, it's more of a circular relationship. But energy efficiency and the power grid are really tools in my mind to achieve the target of a sustainable, affordable, and resilient ASEAN power system of the future. So linking these three topics, as I said, energy efficiency and grids to me are a tool for RE integration, so renewables integration. But the integration effort is really not likely to be successful without changes to the power system. And understanding, for example, and appropriately valuing different measures are really going to be key to the affordable and clean transition that the world basically is going through, and that the IEA outlines really well with their net zero scenarios, and EMA is really at the forefront on implementing with their 80-80-80 strategy. So if we look at distributed renewables, they represent both challenges and opportunities. So they're real opportunities because they're located close to demand, which is not the case for utility scale renewables, which are typically far away from demand centers, and thus requires heavy investment in grids, which can take a long time to build out, whereas distributed renewables can be placed closer to the demand centers. So that's a real opportunity. On the other hand, on the challenge side, it can be really difficult for system operators to manage because they can be placed behind the meter. That means that they show up as reduced consumption. that can be tricky because you can't necessarily directly see the production of, for example, PV solar on rooftops. And also, it can lead to challenges in terms of the grid, in terms of tariffing. So how do you make sure that everybody pays their fair share, and the ones who don't invest in distributed renewables are stuck with the bill for the grid? So these types of challenges are real, and they need to be thought into the ecosystem in order for buildings to be able to play their part. So how about demand response? Well, in my view, demand response is defined as anything that has the ability to shift demand in response to the state of the power system. So it can be very many things. It can be EVs, it can be residential demand, it can be commercial demand. Buildings definitely have a lot of potential here. But why would a consumer choose to, for example, charge their EV at a different time if there's no gain for them? Convenience is a really high factor, especially for residential demand, because when we talk about electricity consumption, it's really something that we all, and myself included, just think of is something that's just there. It's just a given, and it's really not. But it's really not necessarily the sexiest of topics. So how to engage the average consumer is a real worry. And if there's nothing in it for the average consumer, why would they want to engage? So to me, there needs to be some institutions or some platforms so that we can enable consumers to signal their willingness to be flexible, and also so system operators can see this willingness, because how can they activate any flexibility if they can't see it and can't communicate with it? So in this respect, buildings and demand response really increases the complexity of the power system, but also the beauty of it, so to speak, because it becomes very interactive. And as we've seen, and we see it a lot at the UN, that civil society and the average citizen is increasingly concerned about the renewable agenda, and increasingly interested in doing their part. So this is why I think the buildings topic is so timely, because it's about time that we figure out how to activate that part. So enabling demand response, as I mentioned, that you really need institutional setups and the right incentives. But what we see in most of ASEAN, but also Asia Pacific, is that we do not necessarily have system reflective tariffs. And this goes back to the incentive that I was talking about. If you have a flat rate on your electricity consumption, why would you turn on your washing machine when it's better for the grid? And you can discuss, well, does my washing machine really matter? But if it's millions and millions of washing machines or cooling ACs, then it really does matter. We're seeing it actually exemplified right now in Tokyo. Tokyo, Japan is going through a massive heat wave, and they're mobilizing every resource that they have to make sure that their grid doesn't give out and their power system doesn't give out. Actually, they've been able to mobilize 300 megawatts of demand response, which to me says there's immense potential there. And there's a need to figure out how to tap into it. So with that, I would like to conclude that I think it's very clear that the ASEAN power system is changing. It is an incredibly interesting region to be in. There's many challenges, many opportunities, and the political will that we're seeing from ASEAN stakeholders is tremendous, and I really applaud that, and especially EMA. Again, LTMS is really showing the path forward for new ways of collaboration, and I have to really commend that. But in order to achieve affordable, reliable, clean energy systems of the future, we really need to mobilize all resources. And that includes buildings, and demand response definitely has a role to play. But the right enabling environment really needs to be there, or it won't start to be mobilized. So to me, understanding the role and the interplay that technology and institutions have, because just investing in smart meters is just not going to be enough. You need to have the institutions to make sure that they're utilized in their full potential. And understanding and developing that interplay is something I think is on everybody's mind. and a really, really important topic. So again, I would like to congratulate you all for this timely event and this timely training, and wish you all a very good training week. And again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.